Meeting. My name is Dave and I'll be your moderator tonight, and we've got an action-packed presentation for you. But before we get started, let's hear a few words from Metro's CEO and General Manager, Daryl Haley.
Hello, I'm Daryl Haley, CEO of Metro. Thank you for joining us today. This is a very exciting time for us here at Metro. With the passage of Issue 7, it's now time to roll out the Reinventing Metro plan. The Reinventing Metro plan includes infrastructure improvements. It includes more frequent bus service. It improves improved customer amenities. Today, you'll hear a presentation about all of those exciting changes that are coming. Thank you for your help in Reinventing Metro. Together, we will usher in a new era for transit in Hamilton County.
Thank you, Daryl. Just a few more notes before we get started. I want to make sure that everyone is aware that we are recording this presentation tonight, and we're also streaming it on Facebook Live. Following the presentation, we will have time for Q&A, and if you have a question related to the presentation that you would like answered live, please type it in the Q&A box. Do not use the chat box. We'd also like you to submit your questions and comments by email to reinventingmetro@go-metro.com, or follow us on social media to keep up to date on all of the latest developments and news from Metro. Also, following tonight's meeting, immediately, we will send you an email with a link to a survey with instructions on how to get your free day pass. Also, everyone who completes a survey and provides us with their name and email will be entered into a drawing for a free 30-day rolling pass. So make sure you do that. Finally, throughout tonight's presentation, we will be asking several polling questions, and we invite you to play along with us and answer those. So let's get started now. Can we have the first polling question? Question number 1. What statement best describes how often you use Metro? Daily, or 5 or more times per week? Frequently, 3 or 4 times per week? Occasionally, 1 to 2 times per week? I used to ride, but I do not ride anymore. Or I do not use Metro. Okay, I do want to mention that for those of you who are watching this live on Facebook, the poll questions will not appear, so that's why I'm reading them out loud. I will also be reading the responses as well. So for this question, it looks like we have a 3-way tie between daily riders, frequent riders, and people who used to ride but do not ride anymore. All of those came in at 25%. Let's have the next question. Question number 2, how do you currently use transit? Your answer choices are commuting to and from work, shopping, going to medical appointments, going to school or job training, or taking trips to socialize, such as to restaurants, entertainment, or visiting friends and family. Social distancing, of course. Okay, it looks to me like the number 1 answer in this question is going shopping at 83%, followed very closely by medical appointments and also socializing. Folks using Metro to commute to and from work is about 33%. I would say that's probably related to the current COVID-19 pandemic that we find ourselves in. We'll have some more poll questions later, but now let's get on with the rest of the presentation. I would like to turn it over to our presenters. Khalid Shamout, who is our Vice President of Strategic Planning and Development, and he is joined tonight by Matt Morman, who is the Manager of Service Planning and Scheduling. Gentlemen, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dave, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us for this really exciting presentation. And this is a major project for us, as you all know. And we certainly wanted to share some of the things that we're working on with you, just to start this process. I'm also joined by Matt Morman, who's the Manager of Service Planning and Scheduling, and he'll be talking about some of the slides later on. I'm the VP of Strategic Planning and Development at Metro. Next, please. So I'd just like to spend a couple minutes on what is reinventing Metro. As you all know, last year we had a levy, and that was passed, and we certainly appreciate all of your support for making sure that the levy passed, as it is really critical for our county, our residents, as well as the visitors. But just to highlight a few goals or objectives of reinventing Metro. Reinventing Metro is really about driving the economic development in the county, Hamilton County. It is about improving mobility for all in the county. Reinventing Metro is about attracting new businesses and employers to the region and to Hamilton County in particular. Reinventing Metro is about access to more and higher paying jobs. That's one of the critical goals for Reinventing Metro. Reinventing Metro is to improve the local and regional quality of life. And certainly, to sum it all up, it's about expanding the regional connectivity within Hamilton County and beyond, obviously. So these are really the main goals and drives for reinventing Metro. It's about all of these items. Certainly, to make that happen, to improve the economic base here in Hamilton County, in order to entice employers and businesses to relocate to Hamilton County, to improve the quality of life, to do all of that, we obviously need to fix the transit system and make it more convenient, make it a much better transit system that will provide all of these objectives that we just talked about. And to improve the transit system, we have to do the following. We have to improve the frequency of service. So buses have to come, more frequently than they do right now. We have to provide better amenities, whether it's the shelters, the benches, or even, the access to these stops. Whether it's the curb cuts, sidewalks, landing pads, for wheelchairs and so on. So we need to make it a more comfortable, convenient place, to wait for a bus, as well as a safe way to get to the bus stop. We also need to improve the span of service. Currently, most of our service runs from about 5 or so in the morning until around 11, 12, midnight, and that's really not enough. And even some routes don't even run on the weekend. And we all know that that typical 8 to 5 Monday through Friday schedule doesn't apply anymore. Quite a bit of folks, they work second shift, third shift, they work weekends, and so on. So that span that we have right now, we understand that it's not enough. It's not answering the needs of our community, and we need to improve that as well. Obviously, travel time is of extreme importance to everybody who's using transit. Everybody wants to get to their destination in a timely manner. Right now, we understand that the current network is not very efficient, right? For most trips, somebody who's on the east side wants to go to the west side, they have to come all the way to downtown to transfer and then go back. And in most cases, that doesn't make sense, and we realize that. And that obviously adds time to the travel time, making the trip much longer than it should be. So we need to work on making the network more efficient and to reduce that travel time. So all of these things have to happen. We have to improve the network and our transit in such a way so that we can achieve the goals of reinventing Metro, which is about economic development, bringing jobs here, better access to higher job, paying jobs, quality of life, and so on. Next slide, please. And just to highlight a couple of things in terms of the benefits from these proposed improvements as part of reinventing Metro. With the proposed improvements, 20,000 more jobs will be accessible by Metro. That amounts to $850 million in wages every single year that will be accessible by the improvements that we are proposing. Next slide, please. And as you will hear in a bit from Matt, there are 6 routes that will start running 24 hours this year. And by doing so, half of the jobs in Hamilton County will have 24-hour bus service. That's half. That's about between 250 and almost 300,000 jobs that will have a 24-hour bus service. Basically, they're within walking distance from these routes, about 3-4 minute walking. And that's really important because, again, many of these jobs are in manufacturing, warehousing, and so on, that depend on second shift and third shift employments. Next slide, please. We've talked about most of these points, so I'm not gonna, repeat them. I'm just gonna highlight a couple of things that will tie to the next couple of slides. But one thing that we're also including, because improving the service is not just about the frequency, the amenities, span, and so on, but it's also about the convenience while riding. So currently, half of our bus fleet is equipped with free Wi-Fi and charging ports. We are working towards having the entire fleet, so every single bus will have free Wi and charging ports by the end of this year. And that should also help with the commute, entice people to ride more, and so on. The last 2 points here, and we'll have a couple of slides on these just to talk about them in a little bit more detail, is providing transportation and transit doesn't have to be in one particular way or mode of transit, such as these big buses that you see on the streets, the 40-foot buses, or what we call fixed route. So transit modes come in different shapes, and we're focusing on that because these big buses, they're great for certain areas on certain corridors and so on, and where we have the heavy demands. But in other areas, they may not be a viable option. So we're looking at other solutions such as demand response, and as I said, we'll talk about that in the next slide. So we're looking at different options for our community, not just the typical fixed route system. In addition to the demand response system, we're also considering the BRT, or bus rapid transit. And typically, that's where you have the heaviest demand for ridership on main corridors, that you need a faster service, bigger buses to handle the loads and to get people to their destinations in a much faster way. Next slide, please. So in terms of on demand, so as I said, the big buses, they're great. They're great for certain applications on certain corridors, areas, and so on, but they're not a solution for every area. And we realize that in certain neighborhoods, the big buses are not the solution for one of a couple of reasons. One, we don't have the large ridership demand in these areas to justify putting a fixed route with a big bus, or in some cases the neighborhood streets are cannot accommodate a bus that size. The buses, the 40-foot buses cannot negotiate these streets and so on. So there are other types of solutions, and here there are 3 kind of flavors of on-demand service. What you see on the left-hand side, the point deviation flexible route, it is kind of like an established route with bus stops, but individuals can call at least an hour ahead and request that vehicle deviates off route up to 3/4 mile and pick them up from their, from their house or work of place, and then, drop them off at their destination within a particular neighborhood, or a certain geographical area. And that neighborhood or geographical area could be 4, 5, 6 square mile area, depending on the study and the needs. um, the other flavor, if you wish, that's in the middle, anchored dino ride, is again within that geographical area. People will request a trip, and a vehicle will pick them up from different places, from again from their shopping or home, work, school, and so on. But they take them to specific locations. It could be like a central location as a shopping center, or a transit center where they can make their transfers and continue on their journeys. The third option on the right, dynamic flex, this is point to point. So that type of service will pick up an individual from any location within that area or neighborhood, and will drop them off at any location within that neighborhood. It's almost kind of like an Uber or a taxi service, but it's a transit kind of service. So the importance of this is to provide more mobility options for individuals, so that they can get to their destinations, whether locally within their neighborhood, or they can take, take this service and connect with the fixed route and continue their journey, at some other, outside their neighborhood. And so these are things that we're looking at. And we realize that we have a number of neighborhoods in Hamilton County that we'll be looking at. We will be engaging, we'll be doing a study in the spring of this year, spring and summer of this year, to look at the entire area and identify which neighborhoods would be viable options for on-demand services. And then we'll pick at least 2 or 3 of these neighborhoods. And the plan is by next year, we'll implement these on-demand services in these at least 2 or 3 neighborhoods. Next slide, please. The last thing I'm going to talk about before I turn it over to Matt is the BRT. And as I said, in certain corridors where you have very high demand for ridership, and the speed is also important, that we need to get people from the one point to the end of the route in a timely manner, and to avoid conflict with vehicles and so on. So one solution is the BRT, bus rapid transit. And again, these would come in different ways of implementing them. The picture you see in this slide, between the buses and the vehicles, you see kind of like a concrete barrier. And that's to really separate the buses from the rest of the traffic. And by doing so, the buses will be, going much faster from one station to the other, because there's no conflict with cars. And they have signal priority, so that they can get across the intersections in a much faster way. So it speeds up the travel from the beginning of the route to the end of the route. And typically, next slide, please. And typically, these will come with different stations. Usually, BRT will have their own stations designed specifically for that type of service, but these stations may come in 2 or 3 different sizes as well, depending on the location, the number of people that's expected to aggregate at that particular station. So it could be a medium-sized station or a large station. Typically, if there is a large mall or shopping centers, or lots of businesses located near that station, it's going to be a larger station to accommodate that demand. But we will be studying all of that over the next couple of years, so we can plan it properly and design it properly. Currently, we are looking at 4 potential corridors: the Glenway Avenue, Hamilton Avenue, Montgomery Road, and Reading Road. We will end up picking 2 of these 4 on which to deploy or implement the BRT system. And we're hoping that in the next couple of years, we will have finalized that and started the design of it. This to implement a BRT is a multi-year project because we have to do, our due diligence and the planning and design, and then there's this construction, whether it's the concrete barriers as well as the stations that have to be designed and constructed. Sometimes, some of the intersections may also require some redesign and so on. So typically, it'll take at least 5 to 6 years from start to finish before we can run the service. Next slide, please. So I'm going to turn it over to Matt, but let me just sum everything up together. And I think there's a question coming before we go to Matt. So everything that I've just said in terms of improving the level of service, the frequency, the span, the weekend service, and all of that, in addition to improving the amenities, introducing new transit modes such as the on-demand service and the BRT. We have to do all of that to improve the transit system, in totality. We cannot just do one or two of these items. All of that has to be done. And we have to do all of this to reach the goals of reinventing Metro, which is about the economic development, mobility for all, and providing access to jobs and attracting more jobs to the region. Thank you.
Thank you, Khaled. And now we are going to have another poll question. So if we could pop that one up there, please. For those of you watching on Facebook Live, which of the following improvements would most benefit you? Increased frequency, which is routes running more often. Increased span of service, which is routes that run earlier and or later in the day. Decreased travel time, or access to new places. I will remind you that this is multiple choice, so you can choose as many options as you'd like. Okay, for those of you watching on Facebook, the number one answer is increased frequency. That came in at 80%, followed by almost a tie between decreased travel time at 50 and access to new places at 60. And not to be left out, increased span of service came in at 40. So it looks like all of the benefits of Reinventing Metro are of benefit to everyone attending tonight. Now I'd like to turn it over to Matt Moorman, who will take you through the specific changes that are coming in year one. Matt?
All right, thank you, Dave. Good evening, everyone. My name is Matt Moorman, and as Dave mentioned, I am the Manager of Service Planning and Scheduling here at Metro. I just want to thank you all for taking the time to attend this evening's meeting, and we appreciate all of your feedback as we work to shape transit in the coming years for our region. So as you know, tonight's meeting is geared specifically toward the Route 4, but I'll briefly go through all of the changes that we are implementing later this year. Dave, if you could go back one slide, please. There's a lot of information on this slide, and I know the print's a little small. The information is available on our website at go-metro.com, and we will walk through all of these here as we go along. So in year one, which is 2021 this year, we will be making improvements to 9 different routes. The most significant change will be the addition of 24-hour service on 6 of our busiest and most frequent routes. So those 6 routes will run 24 hours a day, 7 days per week, 365 days per year. So those 6 routes, starting from the west and moving east, are as follows. Glenway Avenue, Route 33, Hamilton and Clifton, Route 17, Vine and Paddock, which is Route 78, Reading Road, Route 43, Gilbert and Montgomery on the Route 4, and Madison Road, which is covered by the Route 11. So again, those 6 routes will begin operating 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days per year. In addition to the 24-hour service, routes 17, 33, and 78 we'll see higher frequency or buses running more often on weekends. And some other improvements for this year, the routes 16 and 20, those serve Winton, Spring Grove, and the Central Parkway corridors. And I also might mention they also serve the new Northside Transit Center. Will begin running on Sundays. Those two routes currently do not have any service on Sundays. And both those routes, 16 and 20, will also run more frequently during the week. The Route 46 will begin operating earlier in the day, and it will also take a branch from the Route 43. Specifically, the Winton Hills branch will become part of the Route 46 and will have much better frequencies. And so as we transition to the next slide, as promised, we'll talk a little bit more about the changes coming to the Route 4, which serves predominantly the Montgomery Road corridor. And we'll talk about the changes for the improved service that are coming this year. So this route currently operates weekdays from around 4 a.m. until about 1 a.m. And as I mentioned earlier, this route will begin operating 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365. The Route 4 is actually already one of our highest frequency routes. So you will continue to see 10-minute frequency during our peak periods, 20-minute frequency during the midday times, and 30-minute frequency in the evening hours. Currently on weekends, Route 4 operates from about 5 a.m. until 12:30 a.m. And again, those will increase to 24/7, 365. Saturday and Sunday frequencies will continue to be very good at 20 minutes and 30 minutes respectively for those 2 days. Now, if you look at the map, there are 3 main branches of this route. Sometimes we refer to them as patterns. All branches serve downtown Cincinnati and travel outbound via Gilbert Avenue, which turns into Montgomery Road. The blue line you see there that has the dark outline is the Kenwood branch, and that is the branch that will begin operating 24 hours a day. The other 2 branches, which are the Ridge Road branch, turning onto Kennedy and making its way toward Ridge Road and ending at the Oakley Transit Center, as well as the Silverton branch that serves Highland and Plainfield, heading up to UC Blue Ash, will continue to see the frequent service that we are currently operating. So all of these improvements will benefit anyone who is traveling downtown Cincinnati, Walnut Hills and Evanston, Xavier University, Norwood, Kennedy Heights, Pleasant Ridge, Silverton, Kenwood, Deer Park, and of course, University of Cincinnati Blue Ash campus. So again, I know this presentation is focused on the Route 4, but we do have a couple more slides and we'll go through them here quickly of the other routes that have improvements for year 1. The next one being the Route 11, which serves the Madison Road corridor. The next being the Route 16, which is Central Parkway, Spring Grove, and Winton. Route 17 serving Clifton and Hamilton corridors. The Route 20 serving Central Parkway, Spring Grove, and Winton roads. The Route 33 serving the Glenway Avenue corridor. The Route 43 serving Reading Road. 46 serving Uptown and Avondale. And the Route 78, which serves Vine Street and Paddock corridors. So those are the changes for year 1. And at this point, I'll turn it back over to Khaled. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Matt. I'll turn it over to David.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. We have the last couple of poll questions for the night before we turn it over to you in the audience to ask your questions. So if we could have the first of the last 2 poll questions, please. This question asks, after these improvements, would you use the Route 4 in the future? Your answer obviously is yes or no. Okay, so it looks like 100% of those who responded to this poll question answered yes. They will use the Route 4 more in the future once it becomes a 24-hour route and has a lot more frequency. So if we could have our last poll question of the night, please. All right, for those of you following along on Facebook, The final question is, if you said no to that previous question, what would be the reason? So if you answered no at home and we don't have your answer here on the presentation, your choices are: it does not run during the day or time when I need it. My destination is not on the metro line. The bus does not come often enough, or there's some other reason. Okay, so for those who did not answer yes to the previous question, it is 50-50 between it does not run during the day or time when I need it, and my destination is not on the metro line. I'd like to thank everybody for playing along with us and answering these poll questions. This data does actually help us with some valuable feedback on the Reinventing Metro plan. Now, as promised, I'd like to hear from you out there in the viewing audience. So please, as I said before, submit your questions into the question box. Do not use the chat feature. As I mentioned before, if you have a need to ask a question or want more additional information that you don't feel like putting into the question and answers tonight, please send us an email at reinventingmetro@go-metro.com. I invite you once again to follow us on social media at Cincinnati Metro. We have Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter accounts. You can stay up to date on all the latest Metro news. And I will mention again that after tonight's meeting, we're going to send you an email with a link to a survey that has some additional questions that we would really like you to take the time to answer. It won't take long, 3 to 5 minutes. And also it'll include instructions on how to get your free day pass just for being part of this meeting. And wait, there's more. If you complete that survey and provide us with your contact information, you'll be registered to win a free 30-day rolling pass. That's exciting. Now let's get to your questions. The first question comes from Michael Denlinger II, and he wants to know, how will Reinventing Metro benefit access transportation service for the elderly and developmentally disabled population? Excellent question. I'll turn that over to Khalid and Matt.
Thank you, Michael, for that question. It is a really very important question. So thanks for asking it. And indeed, access service runs parallel to the fixed route. So by ADA requirements, the access service has to mirror the fixed route. If we are running in terms of the hours of service, the days and the coverage as well. So whatever improvements we are making on the fixed route will apply to the access service. Not this year, but following years, for example, we'll be adding additional new routes. So with that, expanding the coverage area, the geographical area, then access service will also be available in those new areas. For this year, once we increase the span of service, whether it's 24 hours or otherwise, then the same would apply for the access service.
Thank you, Khalid. I would like to mention, Michael, that we will be having a special Reinventing Metro community meeting dedicated just to access service and its customers. The date for that has not actually been set yet, but it will be sometime in February. So please stay tuned to all your Metro news so you can get that information and attend that meeting, where we'll have a lot more information specific to access service and access customers. Now we will turn the question over to Bob Herring. Bob, I believe you've been at one of these other meetings before, so I welcome you back. Bob wants to know, with BRT, is that eventually all 4 routes or ultimately just the 2?
For the first phase, and by first phase, I'm not talking about this year's first phase of fixed route, but for the first phase of BRT, we'll be looking at implementing only 2 BRT on 2 of these 4 corridors. After that, I really don't know. Definitely, we would like to have BRT on all 4 corridors, but again, we need to do the planning first to make sure that we're selecting the right corridors that will have the right demand. So whatever investments that we make will, will be worthwhile and will have the right return on them. And we don't know how things are going to change in 8, 9, 10 years from now. If there's, the demand is still there and it makes sense to add a third and a fourth corridor, by all means. I mean, again, the whole point of BRT is to improve the entire transit network. And if we need to do that on the third and the fourth one, then certainly we'll do that.
Thank you, Khalid. Now, Melody Banks wants to know, she would like to see weekend service on the 4 Silverton. There is currently no service now, and she needs it to work on weekends.
Matt, you want to take this one?
Sure, that's absolutely something we're looking into, and the actual, the purpose of these meetings is this is the feedback that we're looking for. So we definitely appreciate that. We'll note that and take a look at it and see what we can do and add it to the plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. James Harley wants to know, will Access Paratransit service run 24 hours in the areas where the Metro service will run 24 hours?
Yes, I mean, as I mentioned earlier, whatever improvements we make on the fixed route side, we have to mirror that on the access side as well.
Bob Herring has a follow-up question. The construction of the BRT for Route 4 would seem to be very difficult on Montgomery Road. In some places, it's only one lane, such as through Kennedy Heights and Pleasant Ridge.
Again, I mean, these are really very, very good questions. And I'm glad that, these questions are being asked, but they're excellent ones. And you're absolutely right. There are, certain concerns on Montgomery as well as on the other 3 corridors as well. And it's never, a perfect situation where you have a corridor that's perfect in every aspect of it. And that's why we need to do our due diligence and the planning. And typically with these kind of projects, and from your question, it seems that you know quite a bit about these kind of services. But the typical approach to these is, there's a selection or evaluation criteria that's established on which we score each of these corridors, taking into consideration, the demand, the ridership there, the expected ridership, the developments, the width of the streets, the availability of the right of way, the impacts, the cost of the construction, and so on. So all of that will be taken into consideration before we make the decision on which corridors to select. Because on some of these, I mean, even Montgomery, right? I mean, certain segments we have a really wide streets, and it'd be very easy to put a bus lane there. But then there are other segments where it's really constricted, and that is a challenge for us. So all of that will be taken into consideration when we do the planning phase in determining which corridors are the most viable in phase 1.
All right, now we have a question from Kevin Hoos, who wants to know what is going to happen with the Metro Plus line that's currently going from downtown to UC to Kenwood.
Yeah, sure, Kevin. Thanks for asking that question. As of right now, we do not have plans to change the Route 90 where Metro Plus is currently running, but it's definitely something we'll be looking at in future years or future plans. But as of right now, no immediate plans.
Melody Banks has a follow-up question. The second to the last question did not give an option if your ridership would increase. So I think she's wanting to know, are we planning for ridership increases with these improvements?
Second to last questions doesn't have option if your ridership would. I'm not sure I follow the question. Matt, David?
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm not sure I quite understand the question. If Melody, if you could clarify that, we'd be happy to come back to it.
Yes.
Okay, while we're waiting for Melody to make us a little clearer on what she's asking, we'll go back to Michael Denlinger, who wants to know, does that mean that access will run 24 hours in these areas?
Correct.
Cynthia Wright wants to know, regarding Route 4, she saw that in the presentation that it will come on weekends every 20 minutes, which it's currently doing now. Will it increase that to every 15 minutes, just like with Metro Plus? With every 20 minutes, the same as it is now, it's hard standing outside in the cold or standing outside when it's hot or the pouring rain or trying to go to your destination to and from. And it takes an hour or two to do that. The Kenwood and Ridge Road on Saturdays and Sundays are terrible, especially in Kennedy Heights on Montgomery Road.
Matt?
Sure. And I don't know if Mark is on. He might have some more information for you. But in the subsequent years of Reinventing Metro, we do have plans to increase frequency on the Route 4. I don't have off the top of my head which year that is, but we do have plans in future years to increase frequency. I don't know if Mark wants to add anything to that or not.
No, that's a good sum up.
Let me just add, and thank you, Matt, for that, but let me just add a little bit more information here. We certainly, understand that frequency is really critical to everybody, and for traveling and using transit, and that's a given, obviously. And and we would love, as an agency, to make all of these improvements at once, whether it's the phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and so on. Because again, we really understand the dire need for an improved transit system. However, we just can't do everything at once, right? I think we all agree on that, just because in terms of the resources, the cost, and so on. And just to put things in perspective, if we need to order buses, it takes at least a year, 12 to 14, 15 months before we get the buses in. So we had to make some strategic decisions in terms of, for phase 1, what is it that we need to implement that we can do fairly quickly and would improve the service, greatly on some of these routes, without requiring additional resources, meaning buses, for phase 1, because we really want to implement as much as we can in the shortest period of time. And that's why these proposed improvements are mainly about the span of service, the weekend service, and so on. And the reason is, if we touch frequency a lot, if we make frequency, like you're suggesting, going from 20 minutes to 15 minutes, which is absolutely justified, and we certainly agree with that. That's going to require additional resources. So now we need another, 50 buses or 60 buses, not only on that route, but for the other routes as well. And we won't have these for at least a year and a quarter from now, which means we're going to delay all of these improvements until then. So we're trying to deploy as much as we can that doesn't require additional resources. But rest assured, as you heard from Matt, that in subsequent years, we will be making further improvements. So the improvements we're proposing on these 9 routes in phase 1 will not be the final improvements throughout Reinventing Metro. So in the following years, you will see further improvements to many of these routes as well.
Thank you, Khaled. I would like to add that the opportunity for us to have this interaction and get this direct feedback from you, listeners and viewers, is critical. And so we're getting some really good questions, and I appreciate that, which just leads us to our next question from James Harley, who wants to know, will the fares raise?
It's kind of yes and no answer. And the reason is, we're looking at the base fare. I mean, in a nutshell, it will go up slightly. However, we're trying to get away from zones. So overall, I think it's going to be almost pretty much the same, or maybe slightly more if you take the average, because we understand, all of these zones are really confusing. And in many cases, they just don't make any sense to our customers. And sometimes, just turns them off from, using transit. And it is pretty cumbersome. So we're trying to get away from zones. So hopefully sometime this year, will have just a flat fare, within the service area. Obviously, special services like the express will be priced slightly higher just because of the type of service. So in a way, yes, the fares will increase slightly, but we're getting we're getting rid of the zones, so which would help. In addition, we have the daily pass, day pass, and the 31-day pass. So those should also help mitigate, any of these fare changes.
Okay, we hear back from Melody now. She was actually giving us some feedback on our rider question we were asking. She was suggesting that we change the wording of the question to make it a better question so that we can get a better idea of what our ridership increase will be. So as one of the people who helped develop the poll questions, I appreciate your feedback, and we will definitely take that to heart. And if you attend any more of these meetings, you will see a different question on there. So thank you, Melody, for that. Kevin replies back that that is good to hear about the Metro Plus. Now, with all the 4 proposed routes running north and south, are there any plans to have an east-west connection for those routes?
Mark, you want to take that, or Matt?
Yeah, I can take that. So the whole Reinventing Metro plan involves these increases in frequencies and span to existing routes, but also a host of new routes and realignments. So in future years, when we increase the size of our fleet, routes will continue to serve our crosstown routes we serve now, but add one on roads like Galbraith Road, bolstering the existing crosstown like Route 41, which connects in Pleasant Ridge, so that it runs much more frequently, and some better connections, as Khalid mentioned earlier, with more on-demand flexible route service farther north in the county. So yeah, there will be more east-west connections in different ways, not just more service on Montgomery Road itself.
Thank you, Mark. It looks like we have one more question here, and this one is coming from Michael Denlinger II again. He wants to know, will access fares eventually be payable through the app on a smartphone?
Yes, that's something that the agency is considering, and definitely, we'll keep the public, updated on that. But this is something that the agency sees, of value to the customers. Now, it would not be the only way to pay. Obviously, they could still pay with other means, but we see that there's a great deal of value in that, and some customers actually asked for that as well. So that's being considered by the agency.
And I would like to remind Michael and James and anyone else who is interested in access paratransit service and how Reinventing Metro is affecting that to make a note to keep in touch with Metro, because we will be having a Reinventing Metro meeting to talk just about the access service improvements that are going to be coming with Reinventing Metro. So it'll be sometime in February. A date has not been set for that, but please stay in touch, follow us, and you will find out. We have a couple more questions that have come in since then. James is following up. He wants to know, will he be able to ever make an access reservation online?
I really don't know. I think that'd be a perfect question for the access conference or call when that happens. They'll be in a better position to give you a more accurate answer to that.
Yes, Michael and James, please make a note of those questions that you have and any others that may come up specifically about access. And when we schedule our access only meeting in February, please attend and we will answer all those questions for you and any others that you might have. Kevin has sent us another question in the meantime. He is mentioning that on the weekends, taking the bus from Mount Washington to downtown can take a little over an hour. Will the 11 and the 4 routes line up with the 24 so that you can get downtown faster?
Yeah, I'll take that question. So the answer is yes. That's one of the biggest priorities that we have here is making our service easier to use, making it faster. You saw in the poll questions earlier in the presentation, one of the options was, reducing travel times. Would that benefit you? And we realized that connections and transfers are a big part of that. And we are strategically working actually right now on, moving forward, getting the right software, getting the right analysis so we can make those connections line up much better, not just for the 11 and 4 and the Route 24, but for basically any transfer point in the entire system. So the answer is yes, we are absolutely working on that. And that's one of the tasks that my team is tasked with. So we hear you and we're working on it.
Well, it looks like those are the final questions. And in the interest of everyone's time, we're going to wrap up and get out of here. I would like to thank Khalid and Matt and the rest of his team for being here tonight to answer your questions. But more important, I would like to thank all of you for taking the time out of your night to be part of this. As I said, the feedback that we're getting is critical to making sure that the improvements that we make ultimately for Reinventing Metro are the improvements that will help our customers and overall improve our connectivity and everything for the region. I want to reiterate that if you have any additional comments or questions that didn't come up this evening, please send them to us via email at reinventingmetro@go-metro.com. Please also follow along with us on social media at Cincinnati Metro, at Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, so you can stay up to date on all the developments and news for Metro. And again, I remind you that after tonight's meeting, we're going to send you an email, and in that email is a link to a survey, very short survey. I've taken it, I helped develop it. It's only 3 to 5 minutes, and it will give us some additional valuable feedback that we'll use to develop further the Metro and Reinventing Metro plan. It'll also include instructions on how to get your free day pass. And if you take that survey and give us your contact information, you'll be put into a drawing for a free 30-day rolling pass. And that is a very important and very valuable, I think, gift for everyone who takes part in that survey. That ends tonight's meeting. Again, I want to thank everybody for being here and being part of this, and just stay in touch with Metro, because Reinventing Metro is going to make 2021 and the years beyond an exciting years. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everybody.